Our reading today from the Gospel of John. If you have a Bible, you can grab that. We'll be in John 13. And so a little bit of context. The Gospel of John, there's always this dual narrative that's going on in the Gospels, because there's obviously the original context in which Jesus is speaking to his disciples, but then you also have the the context for the people who it was written to. So the Gospel of John was probably the last of the four Gospels to be written in the mid to late first century, possibly even as late as the early second century. So there is the original audience that will receive this from the mouth of Jesus, so to speak, but then there is also the audience that the Gospel's being recorded for. And so that is a whole separate context. So there is kind of the original story, and then there is, how do we make this relevant to the audience that are receiving it, 50 to 80 years later. So with this in mind, just keep a hold of the idea that there was the original people that received this and the Johannine community that were reading this or recording this later on. And they are in the midst of persecution. So this is not just all of the kind of Jesus said, oh, you'll have persecution, whatever. They're living in that. So there is this tension where they are hearing about the events of Jesus, but they know all those things, and they are the early church experiencing the persecutions that Jesus said would come in the future. And so these gospel words to them are an encouragement to stay faithful, even in this challenging time, to be faithful. But the message of Jesus in terms of being one of peace instead of violence is especially relevant to them, because they are literally potentially laying down their lives for their friends. Because Jesus is saying, don't fight back, love your enemies, do good to them who want to hurt you and persecute you. And so this message is both an old message, but also a current message to them. So we'll set the scene quickly. They're at the Last Supper. There's a lot going on. They're at the Last Supper. The evening meal is in progress. The devil's prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. So I'm in verse 3 here of John 13. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. And so he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. So after Jesus washes the feet of his friends, which is an unusual act for a rabbi, it was something that a servant would do, normally a female servant. It's something that a student might do for a rabbi in terms of expressing honor. It's something that a wife would do for a husband. It was a very intimate thing. But for Jesus to do it for his disciples was not normative. So we've had the washing of feet, and then we have Jesus kind of calling Judas out, and Judas leaves. And that's where our lectionary passage begins. So literally in John 13:31, it says, when he was gone. That's saying Judas has just left. And in the verses that immediately follow after this, Peter says, I'm going to follow you. I'll lay down my life for you. And Jesus is like, will you though? So we have this dual betrayal that our lectionary passage sits in between. We have the betrayal of Judas, who is left to go and do his thing, and Peter, who is very, very bold and confident in his support of Jesus, but we know that ends in betrayal as well. So when he was gone, Jesus said, now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. And if God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself, and will glorify him at once. That's a lot of glory. 5 times in 2 verses. Come on, man. That's a lot of glory. And it doesn't make more sense in the Greek than it does in the English. There are the commentaries are just all we're confident of is that Jesus and God both get some glory here. The rest of it doesn't make a lot of sense. The outcome is clear, though. And glory is about esteem. It's about renown. It's about recognizing something about Jesus and about God that was perhaps not as recognized before. They are being lifted high. Their heavenly majesty is being recognized. And so the final two mentions of glory here are glory that will come in the future, that will come at the crucifixion and the resurrection and the ascension of Christ. So there is the glory that is being given now and the glory that is going to come in the future. But the disciples don't really understand that. For them, the glory is a coronation and a crown and a victory over Rome and a victory over their enemies. But Jesus is planning glory through crucifixion, not through overwhelming military power. He's planning glory through death. And so despite all their Jesus' warnings about this, they just don't really know what lies ahead for them. And so Jesus is meeting with them. It's his last supper, and Judas has finally left. So it's just him and his faithful friends. And he's saying to them, I still want you to understand what is going to come. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. Where I am going, you cannot come. It's been a year since my father passed away. And in the last weeks of his life, I went and I spent a week just living with him. And I don't know about you, but I have boxes of just kind of stuff that I've been accumulating that has no worldly value at all, but I accumulated and I can't get rid of it. And in that last week of his life, I pulled out all his boxes of stuff that he had accumulated in a lifetime, and we went through all his junk. And I mean, it was junk, but it was deeply meaningful junk to him. It had old diaries and old photos, and everything had a story. Everything had a reason that he'd held on to it. Things where he was proud of other people, or things where he was proud of himself, things that he wanted to be remembered for. And we went through each and every last thing, and he shared of the most important things in his life. He knew the end was coming very soon, and he wanted to be sure that he'd said all the things he needed to say and done all the things he needed to do. And at the very end, the thing that was most pressing on my father's heart was, what will happen to my wife, Jan? What will happen to my mum? He was very concerned about her welfare when he died. And then in the last 24 hours of his life, I sat with him in the hospital, and this desire that my mum would be well cared for was still forefront in his mind. And as that evening came to a close and we kind of thought that he would have another week with us, the last parting words that I had with him was simply to say, we will look after mum. And that was the last thing I said to him. He didn't need to worry. You see, his primary concern wasn't about the pain that he was experiencing, which was significant with late-stage cancer. It was actually about the people that he loved and how they would manage when he was gone. And so it is with Jesus here. He's come to the end, and he's not so much concerned about what he is about to endure as he is concerned about the people that he loves and how they will manage when he is gone. And so he gathers his friends and he washes their feet. He's condescended himself all the way from heaven into that space with them, and then he again has lowered himself to be a servant and wash their feet. He's trying to express to them the intimacy, the love, the hope that he has for them. And then he says to them, my little children. The word for children there is diminutive, my little children. And then he gives them this most important command. He says, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Now, these are not especially new words. The idea of loving one another, even in Leviticus, like when we go back to Old Testament law, it says, hey, this is kind of the bottom standard of being a follower of Yahweh is that you love one another. So that isn't what's new. The NIV translates this Greek word here, hina, as so you must. And I think that they They don't have the emphasis right here. Like, I get that it's a command, and so the must is implied there, but the word hina is, it means that one thing precedes the other. It's like saying, in order that I have loved you, in order that I have loved you for the purpose of this. I have loved you, and as a result of that love, I have loved you so that you can love each other. A new command I give you, love one another. I have shown you what love looks like, and because of this example, you can now love one another in a new way. As a result of Jesus' love that he lived out daily with them, that he even now in this Last Supper, as he washes their feet, they can see it. And in the events that they will see in the coming days with Jesus' death and resurrection and ascension, now you can love one another in a new way. You see, what's new here is not the command to love. What's new here is what that command will create. Jesus' love in order that you may love, and now a whole new community will be created because of that. The newness is in the impact, the effect of what Christ's love is going to do inside of this group of people. Loving one another would be the entire identity of this new group. They weren't a sports team or a fishing club. Their reason for being wasn't a shared love of mechanical keyboards or beekeeping or woodworking or music. They weren't a mother's coffee gathering or a support group. They weren't defined by a particular uniform or team or hobby. Their new community wasn't nationalistic. It wasn't ethnic. It wasn't creedal or gender-based. This new family would be entirely defined by the way that they loved one another. In his last quiet moments with his friends, this is the message that Jesus wanted to share. He didn't give them a theological statement. He didn't have them recite a creed. He didn't give them a 4-step program or a script for a salvation prayer. That wasn't what was the chief important thing for him or his mission. He gave them a new command. He said, the measure of your faithfulness will be how much you love each other. And the love shown between this rabble of followers would be a herald and a witness and a glory to and a witness to the glory of God. Their love was going to show the world what God was really like. Because they'd already tried a whole bunch of other strategies in the Old Testament to express to the world what God was really like. And then God said, I will turn up and I will example it to them. And he exampled it to them in the way that he lived, the way that he laid down his life, the way that he loved. Their love was going to show the world what God was truly like. Not because of their perfect theology or their excellent programs or their list of moral obligations and duties, but because of their love. And a survey of the New Testament shows many encouragements about how believers reflected that love to one another. Simply the idea of love one another or love each other is 18 times mentioned. Be devoted to one another, serve one another, be at peace with each other, forgive each other, honor one another above yourselves, be kind and compassionate to one another, encourage one another, teach and admonish one another, accept one another, wash one another's feet, speak to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, build each other up, spur one another on toward love and good deeds, pray for each other, offer hospitality to one another, clothe yourselves with humility toward one another. You see, these kind of relationships, the kind of community that Jesus was telling them, because I've loved you, this is how you will change the world. Because I have loved you, you are empowered now to do something radical, to create a whole new type of being that places one another above yourself. And in that relationship, in that kind of community, it breaks down trauma and bondage, because it creates a space where people can be free of judgment, where people can be seen and known and heard. To love one another transforms something inside of us. To belong to one another means sharing our burdens and our challenges, our hopes and joys, regardless of nationality, gender, sexuality, age, wealth, or status. You see, this community that Jesus was saying, this is what it means to love me. It's to build this community by loving one another, was radically different to anything the world had ever seen. All of the reasons for why we shouldn't love one another, Jesus puts those things aside and he says, love one another. All of the classism in society, all of the rich and the poor and the in and the out, and the national divisions and ethnic divisions and educational divisions and wealth and all of that. He just says, put it aside and love one another. Figure out everything else because you love one another. And when people commit to this kind of love, it also means that we learn patience and forgiveness and humility and trust. You see, the hard work of relationship is how we witness something about the glory of God. Having a living faith is entirely predicated on the daily living of actions that transform us so that we can love one another. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Lord, I pray that we would hear this intimate plea of your heart. That the things that we use to stop us from loving one another, the things we do that get in the way of that. I pray that you would transform our hearts, that we would have a new understanding of your glory, a new understanding of your love, so that we can put aside all of the other nonsense and get about the most important thing that you have given us to do. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.